Nickelback, asterisk not even did.
As an offer of proof, I'll indicate.
From Dream Investment
Man,
Accounts.
what's up, guys? Stream crashed, unfortunately. So, had to restart it. It's funny because we finally had some people coming in here and it crashed right away while there was a handful of viewers. But I know you guys did want to watch, wanted me to play the Zerka video I had ready, but that's unfortunate. It's the first time I've ever crashed in the middle of a stream like that. I don't know exactly where we were at with this either anyway, so I guess that kind of naturally transitioned us to doing something else.
Well, I understand what both parties are saying.
And then we also have this here, but it looks like Trump's still not here, so I don't really care about any of that. Just gonna give it a second for anybody who was here to come back. It was such a strange, like, I was getting notifications on the YouTube studio that the stream was lagging, which is weird. And then all of a sudden my screen froze and then it blue screen. For some reason, only my middle monitor blue screen. My left and right monitors are still on. So it was pretty strange. And then it said restarting, so I waited for it to restart, but then it just stayed frozen. So I had to just completely restart my PC.
Saying and
Alright, fuck it. We could watch some of this stuff, even though it's unrelated. I guess if it's more interesting than going over what we missed.
When you observe the world, you see people, you see houses, you see the sky, you see tangible objects. But when you observe yourself within, you see moving images, a world of images, generally known as fantasies. Yet these fantasies are facts. It is a fact that a man has such and such a fantasy. And fantasy has a proper reality. That is not to be forgotten. Fantasy is not nothing. It is, of course, not a tangible object, but it is a fact nevertheless. It is, say, a form of energy, despite the fact we can't measure it. It is a manifestation of something, and that is a reality. That is just a reality as, for instance, the peace treaty of Versailles or something like that. It is no more. You can't show it, but it has been a fact. And so the psychical events are facts, are realities. And when you observe the stream of images within, you observe an aspect of the world within. And so, you see, the man who is going by the external world, by the influences of the external world, say society or perceptions, sense perceptions, thinks that he is more valid, you know, because this is valid, this is real. And the man who goes by the subjective factor is not valid because subjective factor is nothing. Yeah. No, that man is just as well based, because he is bases himself upon the world from within. And so he is quite right, even if he says, oh, there is nothing but my fantasy, you know.
Carl Gustav Jung, the greatest psychologist of all time, a suspected homosexual, that's what I think with Freud. He
All right, I don't know about
has
that.
he has 5 black books and 1 red book. These are spellcaster books. The greatest psychologist of all time has a whole book, and it's on YouTube, the audiobook, you can even see it, a whole book called, I think it was Magic and What to Do with Magic. And basically it's a rod that talks to him, talking about giving his integrity, peace of mind, and soul, his solar. If he gives his soul, right, he gets whatever magic is offering, but he doesn't know what magic is. He just knows it's tempting. He has a book where he sells his soul, not in a cryptic, oh, I think you're reaching, Zerka. No, it's like 1 hour straight of that same language. Like, this is something that no one would refuse. But Jordan Peterson, these people don't ever talk about this. They talk about his work, but they don't talk about this book. He has a whole book talking about himself selling his soul. And I found out you have to soft read his hieroglyphic and symbols in a sleep state, in a opposite of wakefulness, right? Drowsy state. And so
Yeah, I don't know why Zerk is so
and there's
into
something
this
demonic
like
about it, but it lined up
occult
with
esoteric
Albert
type of
Einstein's
things,
dogma.
which is, I guess, makes sense why he likes Carl Jung, because he is a psychologist, but he does focus a lot on spirituality and occult subjects and symbolism.
Like Fuzi said,
I think he's just interesting to read, but he's not somebody I
watched
would
me when I was
honestly
depressed,
take
I was
super
still depressed.
seriously.
He was
And I don't know if Zerka,
creating from us.
he claims to be Christian, especially
Funny, I
I've
watched
seen some
him
of his
sing
newer
this.
stuff,
I
but
watched him when I was depressed.
I don't know,
was
he seems a
reading,
lot
and we're,
into
like,
this
mirrored and
type
fight.
of
It's very crazy, right?
sort of
And you'll notice
occult
things
stuff,
happen years
magic.
later. It's almost like deja vu that synchronize to what's happening in your present life, but it's from the past. And you're gonna notice these synchronicities, and apparently in the mental plane that we all share, they're real. That means billions of people sharing the biggest symbol on earth, the cross. We don't share that in the mental plane by accident. Because Carl Jung said there's no such thing as coincidences. Listen, a book I recommend from Jung, you're saying, yeah, I like alchemy a lot. I don't recommend Ion, right? That's really advanced. I don't know
I
why
haven't
everyone
even
goes
read
there.
this one.
But yeah, that's a great book. And the guy who said he loops 2 weeks happy, 2 weeks sad, if you have this looping life of 2 weeks you're happy, 2 weeks miserable, it's so simple, dude. You're having weeks where you're being versus weeks where you're thinking of being. When you're thinking of being, you're thinking of the past or the future, which is big no-no. Big no-no. Anytime you think of anything in the past or the future, you are about to destroy everything you have here. And I'm telling you right now, it's not about thinking of nothing like a Buddhist. Just follow your desires in right now. So if you have a desire of being a millionaire, what would that look like? What would you do if you were a millionaire? Well, I'd get up in a shower. So get the fuck up and shower. Oh, yeah, but I'm not a millionaire. No, get up and do your millionaire shower. Then what else would you do as a millionaire? Well, I'd go to the park and I'd do this. And you start living your fucking life when you start using the faculty of imagination that anchors you into the feelings of winning. And the feelings of winning are always in the moment. They're not in the future. They're not. God, you are cursed if you're winning in the future. I'll tell you that. Because that means you might get it, but it's not going to come to you in what's healthy. It's going to come to you in an abstract way. Like you're unconscious, that it's like tuning you into these different frequencies in life. You're unconscious. It doesn't speak a language, right? It just says yes to whatever you're demanding. So be careful. Can a man talking about the future demand something? Not really. It's not a scary demand. If I knock on your door and I say, I demand this in a week, you'd laugh. But if I knock on your door and say, I demand it now,
donated $5.
you'd be like, oh shit.
Any advice for someone while not dressing or needing it?
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Way trickier, yeah. Yeah, we don't talk about how tricky that is, but listen, whatever you want in life, close your eyes right now. Don't take my word for it. Try it right now.
Like
close your
some
eyes. Imagine you
manifestation
already
kind of
have
stuff.
that. Linger in the feeling and see if you still want it. And chances are it's not the real need. It's just an illusion. And there's many of these illusions you go through throughout the day that are going to dominate you. But once you unpack them, once you make that opposite real, then remember, when it's the opposite, you don't have it, you want it, then they cycle like wheels. But once you make it real with your imagination, then it's real and you don't want it anymore, and it dissipates and your anxiety lowers because the need goes away. The need goes into something else. It could be something superficial, whatever. It just keeps transmuting. And you can do that for all your thoughts until you come to the base form of what you need. And the base form is what you actually want.
3DNV donated $5.
Compare Jung with Freud. Well, Jung is the best because these meditative practices were based off imagination, how they've been done for thousands of years. And like, for example, you guys learn best through examples. Imagine yourself in your childhood home so we can invoke emotion and feeling immediately in your meditation and you're not blank. Now, don't do this practice alone every day. A lot of people drive themselves into psychosis with this. But, okay, the whole chat, imagine you are in your childhood home. Shit, I'm gonna forget what I'm saying here. I forgot what I was saying. All right, for the active imagination that you guys love to talk about, that is, it's a little too intense of a meditative practice to start with, especially without a coach. But imagine you are in your childhood home, and then go to the basement of that home. Find something like a basement if you don't have it, and start digging a hole, and keep digging. This is an unconscious exercise. To what comes out of your unconscious, I don't know, but something will pop up in your head when you're digging. And chances are, since we're live, nothing's going to pop out because you're not alone. When you're alone, this is a lot easier. But what pops out is going to blow your mind. And as soon as that unconscious becomes conscious, you are healing. Do you understand? So for you guys, it'll be, I swear the biggest issue for chat is you guys follow a million channels and just like sedate yourself with content. I think that's what a chat is. You know what I mean? And I'm telling you right now, bro, you're probably 18. You're going to blink and be 30 and 40 and 50 and nothing changes. No one teaches you how to think. Like, you go to school to train your memory for some books, but it's not thinking. And here's something that'll scare you even more. If every intelligent being on earth they've all written it, whether through scripture or whatever, they've all come to the conclusion that all is mind, that there's an objective and subjective experience that's happening at the same time, and you have insane control over not insane control, you have ultimate control, meaning you're even manifesting when you don't feel like doing it.
The world hangs on a thin thread, and that is the psyche of man. Nowadays we are not threatened by elementary catastrophes. There is no such thing as an H-bomb. That is all man's doing.
I think
We are the great danger. The psyche
these
is
clips
the
are
great
from
danger. What if something goes
that
wrong
one
with the
interview
psyche?
that he did shortly before he died.
See? And so you see, it is demonstrated to us in our days what the power of the psyche
I mean,
is.
that was
for
an
man.
interesting
How
video,
important is it
but
to know something about it.
I
But
don't
we know
know.
nothing
It's just
about
like
it.
a lot of it falls into just a lot
Nobody
of
would give
bullshit,
credit
I'm not
to
gonna
the
lie.
idea that the psychical
Like, Jung is cool and all, but
processes.
I always
of
say
the
if he was like a
ordinary
Christian,
man
he'd be like,
have any
he'd definitely be the
importance
GOAT,
whatever.
like Zerk is
One
saying,
thinks,
but
oh, he has just what he has in his head. It is all from his surroundings.
unfortunately he's
All
not,
such
which is
things.
weird because I'm pretty sure he grew up
And particularly
in
if
a
he's well
Christian
housed, well
family,
fed, then he has no idea.
like Austria.
That's
But I
the
think it was
great
like a
mistake.
Protestant family.
Because he is
I think one of
just
his,
that
I think he had
which
family
is
that
born, and he's not born das tabula rasa, but
had like
as
some
a
position
reality.
in the church.
Yeah.
I think I remember reading in uh, his autobiography. But then that also brings me to this video because just that reminded me of this, which this one gets a little bit more to Christianity.
Just because they don't like the word atheist.
So I thought it'd be more interesting to see,
That's what Albanians
especially
are.
the Jung stuff. Like a lot of it, I'm not saying Zerka seems like he actually has actually read him, but a lot of the internet stuff on Jung, it just turns into a bunch of slop. Especially like I've seen like a bunch of these AI generated reels and stuff. I've seen like these videos that go really deep into things that he actually never really talked about. Even the shadow work stuff, I mean, that's also, the concepts are there in his writings, sort of, but I just think people just put too much focus on that. He never even used the term shadow work himself. That's not really what I think about when I think of him. So I just think it's cringe when
They're all
people
Muslims until you look them in the eye and you go, bro, why aren't you
focus
Catholic?
on things like that, or
And they go,
if you ever gone
"Bro, because we're Muslim."
like certain places,
And
like
then
his
you look them in
Reddit
the
is
eye
just
and you
full
go,
of schizo
"Bro,
weirdos.
Skenderbeg was Catholic. You're betraying.
I don't know why the volume here is so
all
low.
Albanians will be like, yeah, well, I'm not really a Muslim, and they all like compromise and shit.
Wait, let me hear that again.
Devout Muslims. No, they're devout atheists that will claim Muslim just because they don't like the word atheist. They're like,
Why is the volume so low? Holy
no,
crap.
they're devout atheists that will claim Muslim just because they don't like the word atheist. They're like, that's what Albanians are, bro. This is what Albanians are, bro. They're all Muslims until you look them in the eye and you go, bro, why aren't you a Catholic? And they go, bro, because we're Muslim. And then you look them in the eye and you go, bro, Skenderbeg was Catholic. You're betraying your roots. And then all Albanians will be like, yeah, well, I'm not really a Muslim. And they all like compromise and shit. You know what I mean? It's like, bro, you can't forget your roots, man. Any Albanian who's a Muslim is just saying they're Turk to me. Like, and I love you, Dead Hex, but you Ottoman. Yeah, no, in 5 minutes, I was at 8,000 views, no botting at Jack's house with the girls. So, like, when I go back to Miami, that's at my own house with the girls, bring my girls, their girls, all that. It'll be great. But there should be structure. This drinking and stuff. Let's do it like Fresh Fit and really get content. What's your opinion on HIIT, one set training? Well, it depends. What's the goal? Is it sprints or is it high intensity weight training? What are you doing? Why do you push JQ if it's a tool for Rome? No, Rome is JQ. Don't be an idiot. Look at their hats, bro. Dude, are you a Christian? Yeah, it talks about the synagogue. That's it. All right, was it? Yeah. When is next a cult debate? There's no one who does a cult. Like, not even Alex Jones really gets into it. So who the f- would I debate? I'm the only channel who does that. Now, my brothers are not religious, right? But they rep Jesus. Like, when they see how fired up I am and fixing my life up and you know. And I'm not going to lie, dude. As much money as I lost losing my Muslim donators, Oilers, becoming a Christian, and it was a rough time, having Christian people clip channel help me out, having Christian employees, volunteers, it's the greatest thing ever, bro. I can literally give all my passwords to like 20 people, 20 clips channels, and I can sleep like a baby. They cannot, for years, even when I knew them before, they cannot, if they're actual Christians, like they fired up with the Gospels, they cannot snake you. It's so, a Muslim, as good as loyal as they are, there's always a % chance they snake you. Buddhists snake you.
Yeah, that is actually pretty true.
A Christian will snake you, but a real Christian is unreal, bro. And I'll be like, you've been working for me for like 2 months for free. I didn't give you shit. And they'd be like, no. It's for Jesus. I'm like, well, you don't want no money for this? Like, here's some money. And no. It's for Jesus. I'm like, oh, shit. That's why 99% of Christians are not effective, but the effective ones, man, bro, They're so awesome. I just want Christian business, right? That's why I could have made so much more money with my dating course, but I just want Christian business, Christian people around me. I want, yeah. Close your eyes and imagine Christian white dudes all around you. Do you feel snaked? Never. Every that says they do feel snaked is a liar. Close your eyes and imagine Christians around you. You'll never feel snaked. You can't even think of it. And I spent 29 years of my life going, why do I like these nerds so much? Why do I like Ned Flanders so much? Because Ned Flanders is the truth. And Christians aren't as angry as me. Most of them aren't as angry as me. So they'll be like, oh, that guy's gay. Like, dude, he's totally with the devil. Like, we got to pray for him. Like, so bad with that fiction. Like, they're still kind of forgiving. Whereas me, I'm like, yo, the bit. No, I'm kidding. Adam Green is the only heretic I like. Bro, I've started so many wars with him. He's just a likable dude. Adam Green is just a Christian in disguise, bro. Like, he lives the Christian life. He's like Gary. Gary spends every day with his kids, will never, ever kiss a model out of honor for his wife, just lives like a Christian, and then he goes attacks them on Twitter. It looks totally when he does that. I'm like, what the f-? And he'll be like, numerology is better than Christianity. I'm like, what the f-? Yeah. But I'll tell you this, man. Humans need to be humbled, and Christianity is the only religion that humbles people. No other religion can do it correct, bro. To get Zerka to get on his knees is impossible for anything. No religion could make me do that shit. On Christianity, I'll do it with a smile on my face. For Christ, I do it with a smile. Because when you think about it, you look for role models your whole life. Philosophers and these guys, and you skip the Bible. Plato and this, and what about Marcus Aurelius, and what about this? And dude, these guys are flawed, sinful. Jesus conquered death, man. Nothing in history has ever done that. There's nothing that comes close. And that's what being a man is taking the burdens of the sins and burdens of your family and saying, I'll do it. That's what being the father is, bro. So if your God isn't wiping your sin debt, then why is your God even making a world of sin? Gotta question that. And people think Jesus is like a hippie, bro. He was flipping tables and screaming, and he was showing righteous indignation. And there was moments where Jesus looked like pride. You know what I'm saying? Like, he wasn't a hippie at all. He was flipping. Are you baptized? Not yet, but Christmas time I will be. Which sucks because my first church was Miami, so I'm kind of betraying my church. It's still a Catholic church, but I'll do it here because I don't want to do it in another month. I don't even know how to do it. Like, I have to call the church and be like, yo, who's going to throw water on me? Or are they going to dip me? I don't even know what the fuck. Like, I know so much about Christianity, but except the insides of, like, you know, I just went to church for the first time. Was it February or whatever? Or March or whatever? Thoughts on Protestant homes? Dude, I met the greatest converted in February with me, but we weren't in touch for years. My tattoo artist is a Protestant. He's the greatest Christian I've ever seen. So I like mad respect to him. Like, he changed me, bro. I stopped on him. Christianity's fullness, bro. You know how I get spiked viewers going on Monkey and all that. 9.9% of pastors, priests on earth. You guys are like, oh, I have to be a boy. I have to be masculine. I have to sweat by the brow. I have to work. I have to be above my wife. I have to be above my girlfriend. That she has to be under me. Like, I'm so... That argument is that the evil people tried to make people good and then they got tired and gave up and tried to make everyone bad. No, bro. They're inverted beings. They... Satanic in life and finding the verses for me more than page 1 to the... People who do page 1 to the end, I don't even know how you do that. That's so stupid. Why?
Hey, what?
What is your favorite Bible book? Revelations, because it's like the most foggy, like, for sure. I like Matthew. I like Mark. I like Genesis. I like more looking at where I'm at in life and finding the verses for me more than page 1 to the... People who do page 1 to the end, I don't even know how you do that. That's so stupid.
I don't know about that one either. I mean, page 1 to the end, I get, like, it's pretty long, and especially a lot of Old Testament stuff is kind of like hard to get through, especially when you get to like all these achievement unlocked. What the heck? Anyways, you get to all this long list of genealogies and things like that, and very specific instructions on how to build temples.
Like I meme it, but I've never been that kind of guy. Is because
But I don't know. I feel like everybody should do it once.
that I'll never forgive. Like to lead the movement and ask the Vatican for backup, and then bend the cross into an elemental earth, fire, air, water symbol on the swastika. Dude, you know it was supposed to be a cross on the swastika. Like that is the most satanic movement. I'm not saying satanic. I'm just saying like, dude, they're charging up real energy and doing black magic, and no wonder he was so effective. Like he was doing what the elites were doing, right? So yeah, I can never see a hero in my head if there's not a cross on their body. Like, spam cooking if I'm cooking, or I'll in person when I meet you guys. I'm not saying it to make you guys look cool. Don't even with gray hair. It's like sometimes I think speed. Are your parents devout Muslims? No, they're.
Let me see. What else we can watch? Let me go back to the other video. I like some of the other stuff that was getting recommended.
You observe the world.
Oh my god. See, I don't know why the other video was so low volume. So we have about an hour, I think, until the hearing resumes. Unlike the last 2 days, I'm actually unsure what they're going to get into in terms of witnesses. We didn't finish watching this. I don't think
and a probable cause hearing.
I don't think there's a big need to watch the rest of this. I mean, we already know what's going on, but let me just I'll let it play for a little bit while I look for something else.
Okay. At Tho, what was Mr. Twiggs' type?
He was a 7, 9.3.
Did you find a 7 allele in the 8-1 sample?
No, I did not. But again, this is a mixture, and there is some dropout. So just because I didn't see a 7, for example, does not mean I would automatically exclude someone.
It's a mixture, so there was some dropout. So did you assume that at that location that the allele that dropped out matched his allele?
At that location, no. There's only one individual represented there. So when comparing an elimination, I would essentially ignore that location. I'm looking at the other locations where there was.
Actually, this is going to start in about 30 minutes. I might watch this as well. I'm just curious as to what he's going to say. I don't really like Mondani, but, you know, it's weird. The way I rate New York mayors is like based off vibes, because obviously in New York, you're not going to get, or you're not even going to get a Republican, let alone someone good to be elected ever. I mean, I don't think in my lifetime there's been a Republican. Let me look it up, actually, because off the top of my head, it must be either Giuliani or Bloomberg. I forgot. Bloomberg was technically a Republican at that time. So I don't even know if that should count. That's why I was thinking Giuliani, but yeah, that was 2001. If you count Bloomberg, then yeah, I guess there has been, but again, that's a Democrat that switched to Republican and then switched out of the Republican Party anyways. So honestly, it is a little surprising that someone was technically a Republican mayor in New York. Up to 2013 is fairly recent. But yeah, I don't know. Giuliani's probably the real last Republican. So it's like, all right, like if for example, Eric Adams, he's obviously crappy, corrupt mayor. Didn't really get much done, I guess, besides get the new stadium. But he seemed like a cool guy. He said some good things about Trump here and there. So that's like, as far as my ratings go for mayors in New York, it's like, does he seem chill? If Mondani wasn't a Muslim, it would probably be a lot better of a look for him. Don't really like the whole, what were they doing? The whole Ramadan inside of the freaking, wherever he lives at. I don't know where that was, but they were doing some Ramadan stuff. It was looking like another country, to be honest. So I'd be interested in taking a look at that. trying to see when they're gonna at least put up the pre-stream for the hearing, just so we don't miss anything. But yeah, anyways, as I was saying, for New York City, I mean, it seems like it's only been getting progressively worse over time, no matter who's in power, so, or whichever Democrat's in power. So it's not like you can really expect much anyways. Everybody talks, but when was the last time anything's been really that different or improved? At least in my lifetime, New York City's just been getting progressively worse. So I mean, like, hopefully I mean, the only thing I like about him is the fact that seems more of like an outsider than some of the other people, but he is a socialist. I mean, he hasn't really done anything major yet. And like, he has like some stupid ideas. Like, what do you want to do? Like a free grocery store in each borough? So like, what is that? 5 grocery stores for how many millions of people live in the city? Like, okay, like that's totally gonna make a massive difference. It's like these promises that people like make because they just sound good to the ears of certain people. Like, a lot of people thought about that and they're probably like, wow, this is gonna be a big thing. But if you really put it into perspective, there's millions of people across all the boroughs. I don't think, even if he was to do that, I don't think it would make much of a difference. I think he wanted to have free buses as well. Which is like, alright, people already skipped the payment on the subways anyway, so. Yeah, look, it says, I think he already announced one of them. City-owned supermarkets. They're gonna be heavily discounted groceries, so it's not gonna be entirely free. It says, but they're gonna be exempt from subsidized and exempt from rent and property taxes to significantly lower costs. Here's an article about it here to see more about it. When was this? This was a couple months ago. So I wonder. Oh no, no way we have to pay for this. Whatever. I mean, I don't think we had to read it anyways, but I just wanted to see where it was actually going with the plans and see if it even opened up yet. I mean, probably not opened up because, like I said, it's been a couple months since the first one was announced. Okay, apparently it's gonna open late 2027, so still a long time for that, and it's only one of them, and we'll see how it works out. An atheist explains the most convincing argument for God. Let's
All right,
look at
boys.
this.
Pop quiz. What's your plan to lose?
It's been
the
a while
belly?
since I've made
You either get it
or
right
talked
or
about
you're
like
getting
religious
done.
stuff.
I think that there are very good
Religious
arguments to believe that there is some kind of foundational principle of the universe, some necessarily existing
I
being,
hate this
some
guy.
first.
I don't hate him. I don't hate anybody, but every time he comes up, he's just so like annoying. Like the way he speaks and the arguments he makes are so dumb, and he acts like he's so knowledgeable.
I think that there are very good arguments to believe that there is some kind of foundational principle of the universe, some necessarily existing being, some first cause, but I think that the Judeo-Christian tradition is an imperfect approximation of who that being is.
Judeo-Christian.
I think it probably gets a lot right and is a sort of compilation of human theological wisdom over the past few thousand years, but it will get a lot wrong as well. My name's Alex O'Connor. I'm the host of the Within Reason podcast. I think I'm best described as a philosophy YouTuber and former edgy atheist.
The strongest arguments for and against the existence of God.
So I think probably the most powerful argument for the existence of God is the so-called first cause argument, which is quite naive. A lot of people are familiar with the idea that we need a first cause for the universe, but I think people think about it wrong. There is what you might think of as a horizontal causal argument and a hierarchical causal argument. And a lot of people just aren't familiar with the hierarchical version of the causal argument, which I think is probably best explained with a prop, like this lovely glass of water. You might ask yourself, why is this water here? And the way that people tend to think about cause is in terms of time, what happened before what might be called the efficient cause in the Aristotelian sense, which is, well, somebody just poured the water into the glass. And then I might ask, well, why did they pour the water into the glass? Oh, well, because you asked them to. Oh, well, why did you do that? Well, because the glass was empty, because I'm thirsty, so on and so forth, back infinitely. There's just no beginning. There's just, as long as every single step is explained by the step before, then everything gets explained back in time. But there's another way that you can think about causation. I can say, why is this water here? Well, because it's being held up by the glass. Right? If the glass wasn't there, the water would just, fall out, or at least wouldn't retain its space, its shape, even if we were in space. The water is in the glass right now because it's being held up by the glass. In that sense, the shape and position of the water right now is being caused by the shape and position of the glass. Okay, so why is the glass there? Because it's being held up by my hand. Why is my hand there? Being held up by my arm. My arm's being held up by my shoulder. My shoulder's being held up by my body. My body is being held up by the chair. The chair is being held up by the ground. The ground is being held up by the foundations of the building, and so on. And if you kept going, you might get to the gravity that's pulling the building down. You might get the forces of nature which are holding the earth together. But ultimately, all of this is happening now in a time slice and hierarchically. This isn't some causation that goes back in time. It sort of goes up and down, if you can see what I mean. So there is a reason why that kind of causation cannot go on infinitely. And that is that in each stage of this causal chain, the causal actor doesn't have any causal power, except insofar as it borrows it from something more fundamental. I'll try and put that in simpler terms. The glass holds up the water, but it can't do it of its own accord. It's being held up by my hand, to the extent that if I took away my hand, the glass would no longer have the power to hold the water here, right? So the glass's power, the causal power to cause the water to be where it is right now, is literally borrowed from my hand. But likewise, if I removed my arm, my hand would no longer have the power to hold the water where it is. So my hand doesn't have, on its own, any kind of power to hold up the glass. It borrows it from my arm. And my arm borrows it from my shoulder, and my shoulder borrows it from my body, to the extent that if I were to remove any of those parts in the causal chain, everything further up the chain than that would instantly lose its causal power to hold the water up where it is, right? Instantly. So what that means is that there is no actual causal power except for whatever is at the basis of this giving the whole chain causal power. So if you think about that horizontal causation, right? Imagine a series of dominoes knocking each other over. This is causation in time. Domino 1 is knocked over by domino -1, and domino -1 is knocked over by domino -2, -3, -4, -5, and so on back to infinity. In this kind of causation, when domino -5 knocks over domino -4, and then the dominoes keep falling over, I could take domino -5 that caused, all these other dominoes to fall over. I could take that that earlier cause. I could take it, I could throw it in the bin. We don't need it anymore. Those dominoes further down the chain would keep on going. Right? It's the kind of causation where you don't require the first causes, the earlier causes, to remain in existence in order for the causal chain to continue. So another example of this would be like parents and children. You know, my grandfather caused my father to exist. Then my grandfather died.
Okay, I get the argument.
After my grandfather died, my father caused me to exist. Right, so like you've got cause A, B, and C. A causes B. A then just disappears, gets in the C, and B still has the causal power to bring about C. You see what I'm saying? You don't need that first cause to remain there. But that's in this so-called horizontal causation, right? In a hierarchical series of causation, you can't get rid of the earlier cause. And when we say earlier or first or fundamental, we don't mean in time. We mean like sort of further down the chain, as it were. So if my grandfather causes my father, then my grandfather dies, my father still has the causal power to bring me about. But if my shoulder causes the position of my arm, then if my shoulder disappears, my arm no longer has the power to hold up my hand. The shoulder needs to stay there, causing the arm in order for the arm to cause the hand. So all of that causation happens all at once, right? Which means that there is no intrinsic causal power. My father has his own causal power to bring about me, but my arm only borrows it from my shoulder. It doesn't have it on its own. But my shoulder only borrows it from my body, and my body only borrows it from the chair. Without the chair, none of this would have any causal power. My hand would not be able to be here. And without the floor, none of that would be able to do anything. So there's no causal power at all in this chair, except insofar as it borrows it right now, in this instant, from the ground below it.
So, what do you think?
I don't know. What kind of internet does it have?
Oh, it has Verizon.
So if this just goes back infinitely, well, this borrows from this, and this borrows from this, and this borrows, and that goes back on literally infinitely, then there is no causal power at all. Because it's not being borrowed from anywhere. It's like everyone is just borrowing from another thing which has no causal power. It only gets its causal power where it's borrowed it from something else, which has no causal power. So where did it get it from? It borrowed it from something else, which has no causal power. So where did that get it from? That can't go back forever, because then there would be literally no causal power in this instant right now. So unlike the temporal thing, where you can go back in time and imagine that that just sort of goes on infinitely and there's no first cause, because each individual causal actor in the chain has its own causal power to knock over the next domino. The hierarchical causation in this time slice right now, this glass being held up right now, has some kind of foundational cause, which is giving life to this entire causal chain, without which the whole thing would fall apart. So it's a sustaining cause. It's causing things to exist and be as they are right now in time. Not like a billion years ago set something in motion, but right now sustaining it in existence. In the same way that like the law of gravity sustains, all of the objects in this room in position. It's a fundamental, the sort of great debate with something like this argument. So you have different arguments.
So, what do you think?
Alright, I mean, he spent like the first 10 minutes saying the
that deal
same
with
thing
different
over and over. I'm
aspects
trying to get
of God. So this kind of causal argument
further
is 5
into this
famous
video.
ways of discussed by Thomas Aquinas in his Summa Theologica. He gives 5 famous ways of sort of showing the existence of God to be true. And the first 3 are kinds of causal arguments. You have to then do more to get the attributes of God. You have to do more to show that this thing is not material, that this thing is certainly more to show that it's like good or loving or anything like that. But so Aquinas has an argument from change. I mean, it's called the argument from motion, but motion just means change in some sort of older dialects of philosophy. So he leans quite heavily on Aristotle, and it gets a bit complicated, but he'll say something like, for something to change means that something which is potential becomes actual. That's what change is. Like a hot cup of coffee will cool down because when it was hot, it had the potential to become cool, and that potential was actualized. Potential can only be actualized by something which is already actual. Potential can't be actualized by potential. Like if the coffee cools down because it's in a fridge, the potential coldness of the coffee can't be brought into existence by the potential coldness of the fridge. The fridge has to be actually cold in order to bring about timeless, creative first cause of the universe, powerful enough to bring the universe into existence. And if you don't want to call that God, that's fine by me, but I think it will suffice for most people. The strongest argument against the existence of God as traditionally conceived is undoubted to people. The strongest argument against the existence of God as traditionally conceived is undoubtedly the problem of evil. I prefer to say the problem of suffering, because a lot of the time, being an ethical emotivist, especially a religious person, will say, well, how can you call anything evil if you've got no standard of goodness? Okay, let's not say evil then. Let's say suffering. If you believe that there is a loving God who has the power to do all that is possible and who supervises not just the goings-on of the universe, but also supervised its creation and the setting up of its parameters, and there are a few questions that jump out, a few mysteries. For example, life on Earth is the result of evolution by natural selection. That is the reason why we have such complexity and such variance of life. Natural selection is survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest is the same thing as the destruction and death and suffering of the weakest. For billions of years, there's been life on Earth, and for much of that, it's existed in a brutal competition for survival, with predation and disease, and 99.9% of all the species, let alone the creatures, but the species who've ever existed, been wiped from existence, usually in a pretty dismal manner. And all of this is built into the very mechanism by which God chose to bring about human life on Earth. Traditional religious communities believe that humans are very special. They think that we are the reason why this all exists, as opposed to other animals and other points in history, which means that all of this has occurred for our sake. It's built in. It's one thing to talk about suffering as a sort of abstract object, but it is unfathomable, truly, the amount of suffering that these animals, not just like the human species in its 200,000-year history.
So
animal suffering, the human species would be much longer than that, a few million years. But the animals who came before us and the animals who existed at the same time as us, it's genuinely unfathomable, the depths of despair and misery and suffering and torment. Meaningless torment for those animals who don't get to inherit eternal life. And we're told that for some reason God chose this mechanism to bring us into existence. It just doesn't seem to be what you would expect. Of course, this doesn't disprove the existence of God. It's not like logically contradictory to say that God did this for some reason. But it just seems a little unexpected, and I think for most people it's very powerful. Of course, this only really does anything to argue against the existence of a good God. Now, some people will then just say, well, maybe God is evil. But this will then just depend on your view of God, because there are philosophers who, in the course of proving God's existence, have established why he must be perfectly good, for example. There are also people who belong to religious traditions who insist upon the goodness of God. So they would at least have to give up that if they were to accept the plausibility of an argument like this. And I think it's powerful. I think that there are very good arguments to believe that there are some kind of foundational principle of the universe, some necessarily existing being, some first cause. But I think that the Judeo-Christian tradition is an imperfect approximation of who that being is. I think it probably gets a lot right and is a sort of compilation of human theological wisdom over the past few thousand years. But it will get a lot wrong as well. I think that if you have just personally apprehended a truth about the universe, you are just convicted that there's some kind of foundational cause. I don't really know much more than that, and I don't want to subscribe to a particular tradition. I say more power to you. I think you're on the right track. In the same way that if somebody is sort of a dogmatic atheist of the new atheist variety, I have a lot of fun posing religious arguments to them and saying, like, there might actually be more plausibility to these arguments than you would know from reading The God Delusion. But that's not enough to say that you're wrong about your atheism or anything, but I much prefer this kind of person who says either, I believe there's some kind of God, maybe of some sort, maybe not even a God, maybe just something like that, but I don't really know what it is. I'm like, yeah, me too, man. I've got no idea. Likewise, somebody who says, I just, there's a lot of mysteries, but I just can't buy the fact that this was designed somehow intelligently. I'm like, yeah, I get that too. That's awesome. And then we can just discuss it, And so I quite like that kind of person. There are also the so-called deists who typically are described as people who believe that God kind of set the universe in motion and then went away. So does not involve himself. I mean, he could have died, he could have gone to sleep and sort of set it all off, and that explains how it got going, but it's not there anymore. I don't think that makes much sense. I think that this is a product of mechanistic thinking that comes about with the sort of scientific revolution, where we think of everything as sort of like a bit of a machine where you twist it up and let it go. But the argument that I just ran through, the reason I like it so much is because I think it gets rid of this idea of deism. You can't have a God who sets it all in motion and then goes to sleep. He can't knock over the first domino and then go away and the dominoes keep on falling over and he's long dead. Because he's not just knocked over a domino and then gone away. He's holding up the microphone above my head right now in this instant. And if he were to disappear, the whole thing would just collapse. I think that there's a more powerful argument for that kind of God. Not to say personal, not to say that he cares about human beings, right? Like, because again, you can distinguish between those things. There's like people say, well, I believe that there's a God, but he has no interest in human affairs. That's fair enough. But someone who says, well, I believe in a God, but he's just like not around anymore, like at all. I think that might be true. There might be no God, But if you think there's a good argument for God's existence, I think the best versions of arguments for God's existence require that he does stick around. And so I think you either kind of have to say there's no God at all, or there's a God who's still here right now holding it all in place as we speak. I don't think this God at the beginning but not anymore makes much sense to me.
Honestly, don't have as much to say
Want to support the channel?
about that as
Join
I
the big
thought I
league.
would, because he does sort of, I wouldn't say refute his own argument, but he gives like the counter argument pretty well for most of the things. But I just find it ridiculous that this guy, who's like, you know, one of the big atheists on the internet that I see all the time, and he's talking about the best arguments against God, the first thing he says is, well, if God exists, why bad thing happen? Like, that's like the most basic negative IQ argument that could possibly be made. And he did go over some of what I would have mentioned, but obviously he's sort of directing his argument against Christian conception of God, which is fine by me because that's the one that I ascribe to. But just there's many ways to argue against that point, and even in terms of Christianity, I mean, there's an entire book in the Bible that talks about suffering and unexplained suffering, and we aren't really given an answer as to why it happens, but it is something that's acknowledged that is occurring. And then he also gets into, this guy that we just watched, he gets into animal suffering, which honestly I find that argument stronger than people focusing on human suffering, because like I said, it is addressed in the Bible, but animal suffering, I can, and also on top of that, by the way, before I get into animal suffering, you know, human suffering is explained to have started after the fall of man. So at the end of the day, the argument could be made that we are to blame as an entire race for our suffering. But I can understand the argument as to people who question why animal suffering happens at all, because they didn't do anything. Animals don't sin. They're not capable of sinning. They don't have a complex mind like we do to be able to understand right and wrong. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe certain animals can understand to a certain extent, but they don't think of right and wrong in the same way as we do. They sort of are just focused on surviving. So I can understand people who really have a problem with that. But the thing is that when the fall of man happened, it wasn't just us who went down the drain. It was the earth as a whole, because Adam and Eve are no longer in paradise, which was the Garden of Eden. And the thing which is most interesting about me, not interesting to me about the Garden of Eden, that a lot of people just, I feel like maybe know deep in their minds, but they don't really like, I don't know, I just don't see a lot of people acknowledging the fact that the Garden of Eden is basically the equivalent of heaven. 'Cause people always think about heaven as something in the future, something that is to come. And they also think about heaven as just like, okay, you're a floating soul in the presence of God, when that's not what the Bible claims is our final destination. We're told that the heaven and the earth are going to be created all over again, and we're going to be living on earth as, you know, people with bodies just like me and you right now, except they'll be perfected bodies. So obviously we won't be susceptible to sin, and we probably would not suffer at all physically. So the Garden of Eden is the equivalent to what the new earth is going to be once God restores the planet and revives all of us. It's literally the same thing. We're just sort of in this in-between period right now after sin has entered the world. So it's created a separation between us and that type of perfection. We can't live in that perfection because of the sin. If you get what I'm trying to say. And because the world isn't perfect, everything else sort of falls with it, including animals. And he also makes the assumption that animals don't have souls, I think he said, or he implied that animals don't go to heaven, which could, I mean, look, it could be true that animals don't go to heaven, but that's also just not explicitly said anywhere. So I don't know why he is making that assumption when in reality, we don't really know what happens to animals specifically. I mean, there's definitely going to be animals on the new Earth because it's going to be Earth, like I just explained. Not too different from Earth right now, other than the fact that perfection is going to be restored. And there's also mentions of animals in heaven in the Bible. I could probably pull up some verses. I might get into more detail for a video or something, but there are definitely animals in heaven, whether they're different animals or the same animals on Earth that have been revived or are living in eternity. It doesn't say. Like, I could see it being either one. I wouldn't be surprised though if animals do get raised from the dead eventually on the new Earth. I mean, why wouldn't they? So this should be starting soon. We'll get to watch this for a bit before the hearing resumes. Still doesn't look like it's... Oh wait, no, we do still have a couple hours till it goes. I think I was confused about the timing. Because I think today they're not doing it in the morning now that I think about it. It might start in a couple hours. I thought it was like around an hour, but I think maybe a couple, like 2 hours, maybe or 3. Oh, this one says 3 p. Oh yeah, honestly, that would make sense because if it's 1 p.m. over there when it starts, it would be 3 p.m. here. But I don't know, whatever. We still have time. So let's look at some other stuff. You know what? This will probably be a good time to finish watching this.
Okay.
I'm not gonna 2 times it because we do have time. So I'm gonna play the rest of this just so we're fully updated.
So from this chart, when you ran Mr. Twiggs against the sample, what was the likelihood ratio that you determined?
I believe this chart is not the comparison to Mr. Twiggs.
That's not in the report?
The chart at the bottom of the screen is not my comparison to Mr. Twiggs.
Let's verify that if we could. Take that down, the highlight. And repost 38, page 45. I'm sorry. page 39 that is in evidence. There we go, second page. Is this the likelihood ratio from your Twiggs comparison?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, what was the likelihood ratio that you calculated based on this chart?
The likelihood ratio was 1.
1.
Yes.
So that doesn't rise to the level of even limited inclusion, correct?
Correct. It would fall under an uninformative.
Uninformative, and yet you concluded that despite this STR mix reading with a likelihood ratio of 1, that Mr. Twiggs was a contributor to both item 7 and item 8, correct?
I did. So actually, I didn't utilize this calculation to determine that Mr. Twiggs was a possible contributor, or that I could use him as an assumed contributor. I visually looked at the DNA sample, and the DNA, unlike that major contributor, he also had those peaks. So that was one proposition or one hypothesis that I determined that he was an assumed contributor. There are multiple different ways. We don't have a threshold. I don't have to see 2, 4, 8 peaks to determine I think an individual is present. Given that the field submitted him as an elimination, I assumed he was a contributor. When I compared him to that data, I did see his DNA present. So when I calculated the statistic for Mr. Robinson, I used Mr. Twiggs as an elimination.
Let me see if I understand that. The STR mix that you relied upon to include Mr. you relied on the STR mix to include Mr. Robinson as a possible contributor, correct?
Correct, yes.
But when you ran Mr. Twiggs' sample through STR mix, the result you got was that he was not a contributor, correct? Or that it was of not even of limited value in including him.
Based on the star mix run, it was uninformative, but I did use my own knowledge and training to determine that I was going to utilize him as an assumed contributor.
Okay. Your own knowledge and training. Is there some standard that you use for deciding when not to rely on the star mix results and when to sort of disregard it and rely on your training and experience?
I can't say that I disregarded it. When I'm comparing someone, that's my first determination. Do I think this person is potentially included or excluded? If I determine that I think they're included, I will run star mix to give weight to that inclusion. Elimination samples are different. If I'm told that an individual is submitted as an elimination sample, I can assume they're there. Visually, I'm able to look at the DNA evidence and determine, yes, I think there's enough evidence there to assume that individual, which is what I did here.
Okay. At D16, Mr. Twiggs was a 912, right? According to your electropherograms.
That is correct, yes. Mr. Twiggs was a 912 at D16.
912. And did you find 912 at that location in the 8-1 sample?
I'm sorry, the sample 8 or sample 7?
Sample 8.
The only piece of information I had for sample 8 at item D16 was a 12.
And you said Twiggs at that was a 912, right?
Correct, yes.
But at that location, the evidence sample was not a 912, but a 12.
That was the only piece of information that was recovered at that location.
Let me ask you about your interpretation rules for excluding someone. Is this an accurate statement? This is from Butler's textbook. In forensic DNA analysis, if any STR locus fails to match when comparing the genotypes between two or more samples, then the comparison of profiles between the question and the reference sample is usually declared a non-match, regardless of how many other loci match.
I would agree with that if it's a single source sample. So single source, again, meaning from one individual. If I have a DNA profile from evidence and I compare it to a known individual, if there's a difference at even one location, I can say it's an exclusion. If I have a mixture, it's not that cut and dry. I have to take into account how many people are in that mixture, how many pieces of information I have, is there potential dropout. So it's just because someone may not be present in a mixture doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to automatically exclude them.
I see. At D19S, what was Mr. Twiggs's type?
It was a 14-16.
Did you find a 16 allele in the 8A sample?
No, I did not.
Okay. At Tho, what was Mr. Twiggs's type?
He was a 7-9.3.
Did you find a 7 allele in the 8-1 sample?
No, I did not. But again, this is a mixture and there is some dropout. So just because I didn't see a 7, for example, does not mean I would automatically exclude someone.
It's a mixture, so there was some dropout. So did you assume that at that location that the allele that dropped out matched his allele?
At that location, no, there's only one individual represented there. So when comparing an elimination, I would essentially ignore that location. I'm looking at the other locations where there was 2 individuals present.
Okay. Now, a couple more topics and then we're done. When you received this, the evidence, you got more than 7 and 8, correct? You got a number of other samples?
Correct, I did.
You got a backpack, which you labeled as Exhibit 9, and a bunch of items from that backpack, correct?
Correct, yes.
You were initially told that those items related to things that may have been discarded by the suspect.
So initially, we didn't have any information. So we processed that. Those are items that are good for DNA. Not having any information from the investigators, we processed them for DNA. As the investigation continues, it was determined that that backpack was potentially left behind by a bystander, and there was no comparisons needed at that time.
Well, left behind by a bystander, or according to your notes at page 20, the backpack belongs to Kirk's detailees.
Yes, based on the individual that was not my communication log, that was someone else within the laboratory. That was the information that they received.
Before you received any samples, did you request to perform what's called destructive testing on the samples?
Yes, I did. And destructive testing is essentially consuming the sample, cutting the cotton off of the Q-tip or the swab, subjecting it to testing. There's nothing remaining. I have to request permission to consume prior to doing so, and I did in this case.
And why did you do that?
That is part of our protocols, that we have to request permission to consume, and we consume, so DNA, we can't see it, so when an item is swabbed, we don't know how much DNA is on that swab, if anything, or how that swab was used. Did someone just swab using one side of it? Did they roll it and use all sides? Because I don't know that, it's our practice to consume that swab. It's our best chance of getting any DNA evidence.
And that's a determination that you made in this case before you even saw any of the evidence, correct?
Determination to consume?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, remember I referred to that NRC report?
Yes.
1996. Did they say there a wrongfully accused person's best insurance against a possibility of being falsely incriminated is the opportunity to have the testing repeated. Such an opportunity should be provided whenever possible.
Yes, that does say that.
And does your laboratory have a policy, standard 7.4, which says, where possible, the laboratory shall retain or return a portion of the evidence, sample, or extract?
That is correct. And we do actually return the remaining extract, the liquid from our DNA testing. So we did consume the swab. However, there was a small amount of liquid that was left and returned.
On some of the items, right?
I believe on all of the items.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. And that policy that I read is from your lab policy, right? The
Yes.
FBI's lab policy.
Yes, it is.
And then is there also a similar policy from the quality assurance standards, the FBI quality assurance standards, which says the laboratory must have a policy on sample consumption. The policy is expected to provide instruction for if and when the laboratory may or may not consume a sample and any documentation that the laboratory requires.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Now, your report indicates that certain samples were destroyed, consumed, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And which samples were consumed?
Items 1 through 6, which were swabs from possible smudge, swabs of hand swipe, swabs from possible sweat drop, swabs from possible smudge, swabs of possible smudge, and swabs from possible sweat drop. In addition to items 54 and 55, which were swabs of swiped finger areas and swabs of stairwell railing.
Okay, so when you wrote in your report that those items were consumed, which of those items, and by that you mean the actual swab was consumed?
Correct. So a swab is just like a Q-tip. So the cotton portion of that swab was cut off the wooden stick, placed into a tube, subjected to DNA testing. So we consider that consuming. But again, there is liquid at the end of the process that is returned to the field.
And the normal procedure in terms of sample preservation would be something called sample splitting, right? You split the swab and you use half, you save half so that your testing results can be replicated and retested.
So yes, however, again, I don't know how an item is swabbed. So even if I were to cut that swab in half, it could be that I'm testing the half that doesn't have any DNA and the other half may have some DNA. Or the swab may have a little bit of DNA on one side and a lot on the other side. So for the best possible chance of getting a DNA profile, it is our practice to consume the entire swab.
So for the first 6 items, those were swabs that were taken from the northeast corner of the Losi building, correct?
Correct, yes.
And you used all of the swabs, and you concluded that there was no DNA present on any of those items, correct?
That is correct.
So you couldn't do any comparative testing?
Correct. There was nothing for me to compare to.
Okay. And what did you have left after you did that in terms of the volume of extract? What was left?
So it was approximately 3 microliters, so a very small portion.
Very small portion, and you actually used 10 microliters to do your testing of those samples, right?
That is correct, yes.
So if you didn't get any results with 10, what you left over would not be sufficient to get any sort of independent testing done, correct?
It could be tested. However, my expectation, if I took 10 microliters and did not get any DNA, the remaining 3 would also still not give me any DNA.
Okay. And for item 55, that was 2 swabs of a stairwell, from a stairwell railing where the suspect touched the railing, right?
As far as I know, they were swabs from a stairwell.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand from your lab notes that you took those 2 swabs and combined them into one sample and then used the whole sample, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Before you did that, did you inquire whether the two swabs came from two different areas? For instance, maybe the suspect touched it here, but the other sample was taken somewhere else?
I did not. They were both labeled as coming from the same stairwell, and they were packaged together. So our policies and procedures is that we can combine those two together.
And when you do that, you create a mixture, right?
I don't know that I would agree that combining the two would create a mixture. Given the item of evidence, a stairwell railing, I don't necessarily expect that one swab would have one person, the second swab would have a different second person, and combining the two of them creates a mixture. However, I don't know that for certain, but again, I don't know is DNA present, so our procedure is to combine and consume those swabs.
Okay, and in this case, when you did that, what you got was a complex mixture, right?
I did. I got DNA from more than 5 individuals, so I could not provide a conclusion.
All right. Now,
Mr. Burt, and we are at the 4:30 point. I just want to inquire, with not
I just
applying
have
pressure,
one
just trying to
area left.
understand. Okay.
no, be done with it. We talked earlier about your testing of the length of the DNA sequence, the length of the DNA boxcars, not the sequence of A, C, T, and G within those sequences, within those boxcars, right?
Correct, yes.
And is it true that there are different alleles that have the same length when you measure by STRs but have different sequences?
Yes, that is possible.
And I'd like to show you a chart that you have reviewed, I believe. This is, could you bring up 34? This is not in front of the, on the public screen, just for the witness.
Okay.
And is this a chart that you reviewed, that I prepared to, and you looked at to see if I had correctly stated what alleles were found?
Yes, it is.
And does it, as it's presently existing, accurately state what the alleles are at each location?
Yes.
Okay. I would move that into evidence. It's 5 pages, and it's Baker 34.
Mr. McBride.
Yes, I object. Unless this exhibit is reasonably likely to defeat the prima facie showing of probable cause, this is irrelevant to the preliminary hearing.
Mr. Burt.
Your Honor, this exhibit and the next one go directly to whether the comparisons being made between Mr. Robinson's sample and the evidence samples are usable and reliable to make a determination that he is a probable contributor.
I'm not sure I'm following with what you're saying on there, right? And maybe it's just because it's late in the day. Could
Yeah,
you
it could
repeat
be.
that?
So this chart illustrates what allele she found at each location for Mr. Twiggs and Mr. Robinson, and for the evidence samples, the 71A and 81A. The other alleles are on here as well, but we're going to focus on 71 and 81. And for instance, Your Honor, at the, you'll see that under the first reading there is for Tyler Robinson at the D3 location. He is a 17. Okay. And take that down. And then if you go down to the 7-1 towel sample, which is what the topic is of this report introduced by the state, you'll see that she found a 17 there as well. measured only by the length of the DNA strand. And what she's going to testify to is at this location and 5 or 6 others, there are alleles, all of which measure here 17, but actually contain different sequences. And that her testing that she used does not measure for those differences.
And so as it relates to probable cause, that's what I want to keep coming back to. Again, if this was a trial, this may be a little bit different analysis that the trial judge applies. But as a magistrate, taking a look at this and looking at the probable cause standard, how does this comport?
So it comports because it goes to the ultimate opinion expressed in the report that the state is offering, that the report offers reliable support that Mr. Robinson is a possible contributor. And we're asking the court to consider that the comparisons are only based on a limited number of length-based comparisons, and that there are sequence differences so that she cannot distinguish, and I believe she'll testify, she cannot distinguish based on the testing that she did in at least 5 separate locations whether the evidence sample and Mr. Robinson's sample, or for that matter, Mr. Twig's sample, matches the sequence differences here. And this is my final area, and I think I can do it very efficiently, and I think it is important for the court to consider, especially as it relates to the comparison to Mr. Robinson.
Mr. McBride.
And she is also going to testify that the analysis she does is based on looking at the totality and all of the different markers that match and are consistent, and that's how she comes to the opinion that she does. The point is, there are explanations that are susceptible to different interpretations and arguments. Ultimately, we're going to have an expert hearing where all of the literature is going to be before the court, and the court's going to determine if it meets a threshold of reliability for admission at trial. But at this stage, even granting that there may be some argument that may come from defense counsel's position, the court can't weigh it. This does not go to the probable cause determination, and I don't think it's relevant. And this exhibit in particular is not relevant without the testimony of the witness, and so the exhibit should not be admitted on its face either.
But that's why I was trying to lay a foundation that she would, and offered a proof to the court that she would testify that in fact there are these sequence differences at the 5 or 6 locations, 6 different locations relevant to the comparison to Mr. Robinson. And when the state says the court cannot weigh it, the court can weigh reliability. The court has ruled that. So we're simply asking the court to take into account the limited nature of these comparisons and the fact that she cannot, based on the testing that she performed, tell the court whether there are differences between at these 5 locations. She can't match Mr. Robinson to the question samples because she didn't do sequence testing. And she'll also testify that the FBI is in the process of implementing this kind of testing.
All right. Thank you to both sides. I'm going to allow the admission of this evidence, but I'm also going to set a limit of a limited number of questions. We are now at 4:40. This is on the cusp of whether it is applicable to the probable cause standard. I want to afford defense its full opportunity, but I still have to rein it in to keeping it to probable cause and not going into a full exploration, because that's not the purpose of a preliminary hearing. So I will admit Baker 34, but Mr. Burt, I'm going to limit you to how much time do you need to address
I just
this?
need about 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to, the next chart will be the chart with the what are called isoalleles displayed for the court, so the court can see what we're talking about, and that's it.
All right.
I'm just going to have her document that, in fact, I've accurately stated what the alleles are that have sequence differences.
All right. So it is Mr. McBride.
Just on a second matter, which is, I need to cross-examine this witness. She's got to leave town today. I would like 20 minutes to cross-examine the witness.
All right, well, I will go with the, I accept Mr. Burt's representations in the amount of time, and I'm going to talk less because that's consuming more time, and also allow the state the appropriate time for cross-examination given the nature of this witness having to travel. So, Mr. Burt, I'll turn to you. This has been moved into evidence. Do you want it on the screens?
Actually, I don't need it on the screen, just in the interest of efficiency. Pull up the next one, please.
Okay.
I want 35. Take that one down. And is this exhibit the same chart with what are called the isoalleles indicated?
Yes, it is.
And isoalleles is a term used to refer to these alleles that have different sequence but the same length.
Correct, yes.
So across the top there for allele 17 and D3, there is a allele 17A, allele 17B, allele 17C, all with the same length, but different sequences for each of those three.
Correct, yes.
And similarly at VWA, where you say that Mr. Robinson is an 1819 and 1819 in the evidence sample, there's an 18A, a 18B, a 19A, and a 19B.
Correct, yes.
And similarly for the other areas I've indicated there, I've accurately stated what the different sequence alleles are, correct?
Yes.
So I move this exhibit into evidence, Your Honor, and for publication.
Is this Baker 34?
Yes. 35. Baker 35.
Same objection, Your Honor.
All right, I'll admit it into evidence under the previous statement as it relates to Baker 34. It may be published.
And as you look at these 5 areas, you can't distinguish the evidence samples from Mr. Robinson based on the sequence differences, can you?
Correct. I only utilize length differences, STRs in this case. The FBI laboratory does not use sequencing for nuclear DNA testing, nor am I qualified in it.
Right. What is NGS?
NGS stands for Next Generation Sequencing.
And your laboratory is involved in validating next generation sequencing, correct?
We utilize next generation sequencing for mitochondrial DNA, which is a different subset of DNA testing, but not for nuclear DNA testing, which is what we're talking about today.
Right. But the people who market STR Mix also market a sequence platform, do they not?
I'm not aware if they do or do not.
Last question, take a look at I'll save that for redirect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, turning to this state, Mr. McBride.
Oops. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to start by asking you what your training and experience is. First of all, do you have any education?
Yes, I do. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Salisbury University.
And do you, after your bachelor's in biology degree, what did you do for your career and in further education?
Upon graduating from college, I began working at the FBI laboratory as a contractor. I was assigned to the Federal Convicted Offender Program, which was a program under the DNA unit. During that time, I did that for approximately a year and a half. It was my responsibility to open and inventory and barcode DNA collection kits sent in from federal agencies across the United States. I then became a biologist in the DNA casework unit. I did that for approximately 6 years. During that time, I did the actual testing of items of evidence, so swabbing, cutting those swabs, producing the DNA profile. And then in 2015, I accepted a position as a forensic examiner, which I am still today.
I'm sorry, what year was that?
2015.
So 11 years you've been doing more or less the same duties you have now, is that right?
Correct, yes.
I want to ask you about your lab's accreditation. What is accreditation for a laboratory?
Accreditation is a formal recognition that our laboratory is following a very strict set of standards. We're accredited by ANAB, the American National Standards Institute National Accreditation Board. And our accreditation shows that we have to follow standards such as I have to have a certain education background, how we process evidence, how we store evidence. Every 4 years, we're audited to those standards, meaning an outside body will come into our laboratory, look at my training records, look at our standard operating procedures to ensure that we're following those standards.
And you mentioned your training. So what do you have to do as an examiner there, as a scientist there, for your lab to maintain its accreditation?
So for my training program, I had to complete a 2-year training program. During that time, I learned the science behind DNA testing, and I showed that I understood that science by completing oral board examinations and written examinations. I also then had to show that I could relay those scientific results to a jury by completing moot court exercises. And before becoming qualified, I then took something called a competency exam, or it's like a final examination to show that I'm qualified to perform my duties. During that accreditation or that audit process, my training records were reviewed to make sure that I had the proper coursework, the proper college degree, as well as completing successfully that training program.
And do you have to keep up with ongoing education to maintain your, do you have a certification?
I'm not certified. I'm qualified as an examiner.
To maintain your qualification, do you have to have ongoing education?
Yes, on a yearly basis, I have to complete at least 8 hours of continuing education, and this can be done by attending conferences or lectures or reading scientific literature.
Do you also have to undergo proficiency testing?
Yes, and a proficiency test is a test that we receive from an outside vendor. I process that test like I would any other case and submit that those answers to determine if I'm satisfactory or unsatisfactory. This tests not only me to see if I'm still proficient in my qualifications, but it also tests the laboratory process to ensure that we're getting accurate and reliable results.
Now, as you discussed your work in this case, you talked about your work needing to be reviewed by another analyst.
Correct, yes.
And is that true in every single case?
Yes, in every one of our cases, they have to undergo a technical review in addition to an administrative review.
And it sounds like during those technical reviews and administrative reviews, there's discussions between you and other analysts. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And is that an opportunity for training and learning as well?
Yes, absolutely.
And I assume that training and learning goes both directions, that you're learning and you're also helping others understand your thought process, which may train them as well. Is that accurate?
That's true, yes.
The tools you use, are the tools you use validated?
Yes, they are.
And what does that mean to have a tool that you use validated?
So a validation is a thorough testing of a process or procedure. Before we subject any evidence to testing, we ensure that those process and procedures will work within our laboratory. Based on the validation, we create something called standard operating procedures, or SOPs, and these are kind of like cookbooks. It gives us step-by-step instructions on how to do our process and procedures. And then both myself as an examiner as well as the biologist were all trained to those standard operating procedures and tested to those standard operating procedures during proficiency tests.
Now, you've talked about, I think, a couple of the tools you use. One you call StarMix, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And is that tool validated?
Yes, it's validated both developmentally and internally. Developmentally it's validated by the creators of the software, and then we, the FBI laboratory, also tested StarMix to ensure that we could use it within our laboratory and produce accurate and reliable results.
Now, when you say it was developmentally validated, is that in a peer-reviewed study?
Yes, it is.
And is StarMix used, how widely is StarMix used throughout the world?
StarMix is used in approximately 120 laboratories, both domestically and internationally.
I want to go back to some of the questions that you were asked on direct examination. You were asked about an Exhibit 8.4, Baker 8.4, which is the DOJ Ultra, which is Uniform Language.
Uniform language for reporting and testimony, I believe.
Okay. It talks about language that you should use and language that you shouldn't use as an examiner and a scientist, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Now, I want to ask you a little bit about what you do when you have a conclusion, like you did in Exhibit 31. Do you know? Let's see. The directive from the Department of Justice limits the adjectives you can use to describe the evidence and the conclusions that you reach. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
And the thinking behind that is to submit the statistical number and let others decide, meaning the reader decide how they want to describe that number. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
So, for example, if we can look at Exhibit 31, if you don't mind publishing that. Yes, and that's been admitted, so if we can put it on the screen. And Kimberly, if you could scroll to page 3 when that comes up. Thank you. So item 7, sub 1, is the swabbing from the towel from the rifle. We have the number in a written form in the second paragraph beneath the heading, and then beneath that you have a table, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And the likelihood ratio gives the number, right? That's the likelihood ratio. And that's stated in sentence form in the paragraph preceding the table, correct?
Correct, yes.
The only language you can use to describe what that number means from the DOJ directive is very strong support for inclusion, correct?
At my house says, are
And
you an ET?
the sentence there that says the DNA results from item 7.1 are 1.7 octillion times more likely if Twigs and T. Robinson are contributors than if Twigs
This is
and
about to
unknown
end
unrelated
in
person are contributors.
a few minutes,
The reader can assign
so
whatever value they want to that, correct?
after that we'll move on to Mandani, which we are going to be a little late to, but we don't have
to.
to.
8.1, if you'll, Kimberly, can scroll down
That's
to make
just
it a
like
little
a
bit
side
easier
thing
to view.
anyway.
Same question there. The results are from 8.1 are 30 quintillion times more likely if Twigs and T. Robinson are contributors than if Twigs and an unknown unrelated person are contributors. The adjective you're allowed to use is very strong support for inclusion again, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we can take that exhibit down. Thank you. You were asked about formal activity level, and you described this as the lab cannot testify about, or you cannot testify about what action left the DNA on the object. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Does that mean that an individual did or did not touch? Let me ask you this. How can DNA get onto an object?
DNA can get on an object via direct contact, so an individual touching an object. It can also end up on an item via body fluids, such as blood, or through transfer. So if I were to touch an object, and then that object is given to someone else, my DNA could potentially be on that other individual through the transfer of DNA.
And your lab can't, or you cannot testify as to what precise action left the DNA on the object, correct?
Correct, I cannot.
Okay. Same question about time. You can't testify about the exact time that DNA was left on an object, right?
Correct.
But there are some indicators that may give some information about how long and the conditions under which DNA was placed on an item, like degradation.
Yes, degradation or the condition of the item. So again, if a firearm, for example, is in a river, I would expect with the water rushing over that item, I may or may not be able to detect DNA. Also, if there's an item of evidence that is exposed to the elements, something that's been left behind 10 years ago, I don't necessarily expect to recover DNA, but something that may have been left yesterday, I might be able to detect DNA.
An item that has been left in the dirt or has been rubbed in the dirt, could that affect your ability to recover DNA?
It could, yes.
Could it also affect degradation?
Yes.
Can UV rays affect degradation?
Yes, it can.
Does degradation keep you from doing your work?
No, it does not.
Is degradation normal?
Yes, it is.
Does all DNA degrade?
It does, yes.
I imagine if it's kept in a pristine environment, it would degrade less than if it's kept in or if it's found in a less or out in the open. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. You said with regard to the screwdriver, there was some degradation. Did that affect your ability to reach conclusions in this case?
No, it did not.
You said on item 7, the towel, or the swab from the towel, there was slight degradation, not as much as Exhibit 8. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Did that degradation affect your ability to reach a conclusion here?
No, it did not.
You're asked about the PCAST report. You testified that gave guidance on different areas of forensic science. Do you know what year that report was published?
I don't recall the year.
Do you know if it's been within the last 5 years?
No, it is not.
Meaning it's older than that?
Yes.
Do you know if it's been the last 10 years?
I think it was 2016, but I'm not entirely sure. I would say within the last 10 years.
Let me ask you this. Has the science in your area, can I refer to it as probabilistic genotyping?
Probabilistic genotyping is the math in my area, yes.
The science in your area and in your field, has it developed over the last 10 years?
Yes, it has.
And have there been studies that have made suggestions which have been implemented in the field?
Yes.
You testified about Exhibit 7 and 8, that they both had mixtures. Excuse me. Yes, items 7 and 8. In your testing of these items, that they both had mixtures. And you stated, I want to make sure I understood this. You stated, I believe, that the minor contributor was less than 20%, and that it was actually 5%. The ratio was 5% to 95%.
For one of the samples, yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
Does that mean the 5% was from Twiggs, and the 95%, that 95% is assumed from the defendant, the Robinson?
When I calculate the statistic, Twiggs' DNA profile aligned with the 5% contributor, and Mr. Robinson's DNA profile aligned better with the 95% contributor.
Okay. Same question with regard to 8. I think you said the ratio was 11% from the minor and 89% from the major. Is that Twiggs being the 11% and Robinson being the 89%?
Yes, Twiggs better aligned with that 11% contributor, and Mr. Robinson better aligned with that 79% contributor.
You're asked about Baker 4, an exhibit that was titled Baker 4 365. Do you remember this exhibit by chance? I don't have conclusions described in Exhibit 31.
The product, but by independent scientists in order to make this reliable, right?
All right, well, I'm just going to move on from this because that is pretty much the end of it, and we are going to go back to this in a couple hours. And I did want to...
This is a priority for me in terms of our administration. We are speaking about a form of transit that millions of New Yorkers rely upon, a form of transit, again, that serves more riders than some of the largest cities in this country combined, and yet a form of transit that at times is crawling at a speed slower than New Yorkers are walking. And that is an indictment in the policy decisions that have been taken to this point. We are proud now to put ourselves forward as partners to the MTA, to the state, in delivering. And again, delivering means the work on the expense side, the work on the capital side, and also the work on the streetscape. And when we're talking about that, you know, I'm so proud of the leadership that we've seen from our DOT commissioner in looking to make the decisions that will speed up our buses and that will ensure that safety is a priority for each and every person, no matter how they are getting around this city.
Thank you. We're going to go to Morgan from Fox 5 and then Melissa from NBC.
Thank you so much. Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Morgan, how's it going?
Good, thank you. I'm just wondering, obviously you ran on a campaign message to make buses fast and free.
Yep,
Does this
that's what I was talking
investment
about
today delay
earlier.
your initiative to make buses free? Do you think that this delays at all your push to make it free? And then for Jano, I know you're very against making buses free, so I just wanted to see if you're hoping that the faster buses will delay making buses free.
That's a hilarious question.
Not at all. Yeah, come over here. Not at all. I've been very clear with New Yorkers that my commitment is to make buses fast and free. Today, we stand together on how we deliver the fast. And I want to be very clear that speed is something in terms of what New Yorkers can depend on, what they can see on the bus, and then also the investments we're making around the whole bus system. That's what's so exciting about this is it's not just about the bus, it's also about the bus stop, it's also about the streetscape. It's about every single thing that delays New Yorkers when they're trying to get around. We're excited to be in partnership with the MTA and with the state on doing that, and we'll continue not only to believe but to work towards making our bus system free as well.
I just... And we just got to recognize that you want government to work where people are solving problems. Not everybody agrees about every single thing. Ed Koch famously said, if you agree with me on 70%, vote for me. If you agree with me on 100%, you got to have your head examined. Not everyone agrees on everything. We do agree about affordability, and a blow was struck for affordability last week when the city council and the mayor increased the eligibility for fair fares, which is going to make it riding the bus and the subway, not just the bus, but also the subway, way cheaper for 300,000 New Yorkers, including people who work 40 hours a week on minimum wage, who couldn't get the discount up to now. That is an equity and affordability victory, and I'm glad to share the credit with the mayor and the council.
Melissa, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. So the bus lanes, hi. The bus lanes make way for faster buses, but what, if anything, will you be doing to make sure that the other traffic isn't slowed down in the process? And if you will, I don't know how much you ride the bus anymore, but what would you do with your extra 6 minutes?
Wow. With my extra 6 minutes, I would probably just watch the replays of Egypt getting robbed again and again yesterday.
That's hilarious.
Just gotta throw up the VAR. I think the other thing about with this 6 minutes is what it means for New Yorkers. New Yorkers go to great lengths to catch the bus. I'll tell you, I used to live in Astoria. My parents in Morningside Heights. I would take the M60 to visit them. And there would be times that I knew if I missed the bus at 116th and Broadway, I would have to get on a city bike to cut across to catch that bus at 125th and 2nd Avenue and just pedaling as fast as I could to get there. Part of that is because I didn't know when the next bus was coming. And now we know that buses are going to be more frequent, they're going to be more reliable. And to your first question, Melissa, what we want is for the greatest number of New Yorkers to be able to get where they're going in a way that is both safe, reliable, and also frequent. And what we've seen time and time again is on our streets, we are speaking about millions of New Yorkers who are relying on the bus, and they're being trapped in traffic. And what we are excited to see is that for more New Yorkers now, they can get where they're going, and they can do so at a time that actually allows them to breathe at the end of the day. Thank you.
All right, we're going to do one more on topic, and then we'll have time for a few offs. We're going to go to Ethan.
Hello. Today there's a lot of, revelry around you guys working together and all that, but how do you make sure that this partnership continues to work? It doesn't become a blame game of, oh, the state isn't doing this or the city isn't doing that.
I think by following through. We've heard announcements before. What makes today different is not only the shared commitment to following through on those announcements, it's also the fiscal commitment behind these announcements. When we're talking about from the city level, we're looking at a commitment of $254 million in expense funding over the next 5 fiscal years. We're talking about more than $600 million in capital funding over that same period of time. And what we're also talking about is an understanding that bus riders are so often the ones who are thought of the least when it comes to our policy conversations. And these are the riders who are typically being hit by the affordability crisis the hardest. They're being asked to sit in traffic the longest. And now with these fiscal commitments, with these policy commitments, but also with these political commitments, we are going to actually deliver on that. I'm going to pass it over to our MTA chair as well as our DOT commissioner for anything additional.
I just want to say, there's a revolutionary idea that sometimes gets forgotten in public life: accountability. Accountability. We're putting out a report today that has specific goals and specific commitments. And every month, Ethan, you're there at the MTA board meeting and you ask me questions about whether we're meeting our goals. And the MTA has the biggest open data platform in the state. Accountability is part of the culture of the MTA, and I dare say it's part of this administration's approach to this issue and many others, and we're thrilled. I mean, the DOT commissioner and I were just talking in the back about how we're going to address the choke points on a daily basis that develop. That level of accountability and responsiveness is not always observed in government, but I'm telling you, this is an MTA and a city that are going to make good on that.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's been an incredible collaboration between the city and MTA, all the way from leadership down to staff. And that means having clear benchmarks, as the chairman said. It's also developing a series of performance indicators, things that we can actually measure to say, are we meeting the goals? And as the mayor's been clear about, we are going to come back and revisit things if we're not hitting those goals. We're keeping...
Hank Green.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. It looked like I just checked this to see what
Make
your name
sure
was.
you knew who I was?
I was
Yeah.
just checking it was turned on, but sometimes I do have to do that. On one occasion, I've got my
You
guest's
were like,
name
who the
wrong,
heck is this guy?
and it was a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
Although, have you seen that clip of Stephen Bartlett from The Diary of a CEO, where it's the first time he had Dr. K on, and he tells the story that he'd done the research for the wrong guest. So he has this guest on, and you can watch the episode online, and it starts with him going, suppose someone like knew nothing about you. How would you describe your work to them? And then he does this 2-hour-long interview, which is an extraordinary
That's how you should do every one.
I know, right? But we're not doing that
It
today.
saves you so much time.
We're not doing that today because I have seen your work,
Okay,
Hank
great.
Green, and I'm extremely fond of it. And it is all over the place. So many different things.
I do not say no to an idea.
Yeah. And, one of those ideas that you spoke about recently was aliens.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to just ask you about aliens, but you did a video before about the Fermi paradox.
Okay, yeah.
And I wanted to ask you something about that.
Okay.
Can we start?
Uh-huh.
What is the Fermi paradox?
So that's just the idea that if I like to start here. If natural selection selects for growth, which is the thing it selects for. So if there will be more of whatever is able to make more of itself if you sort of give pine trees infinite air and soil and sunlight, there will be infinite pine trees. So if that is the case, and we can see technologically how it would be possible for a self-replicating system to move from star to star, which is possible on the order of the age of the universe, that there should be signs of other things like us, whenever you want to define that. And whether that would be like them having gotten here before we happened, and so we never would have happened because they were here and colonizing us in some way, or just signals throughout the galaxy, weird Dyson sphere signals or radio waves or whatever, just things that look not natural, which we've just never seen. We've never found anything that looks definitively not natural. And if something would be selecting for like, there's energy everywhere, then there should be enough stuff to take up all the energy for some kind of self-replicating system. Why aren't they there? Where is it? What's the reason? There has to be a reason, and then from there, you can have lots of fun conversations about everybody's different solution for the Fermi paradox, which is a thing I love. I love to ask people this. And some people, like some science communicators are like, this is a dumb conversation. I'm tired of having it. And I'm like, well, that's not me. I'll have it forever. I think that it says a lot about us as individuals, because it is just guessing. There are things you can do to like empirically think about it, but like I think it's a lot of guessing, and it's kind of fun to do the guessing.
Yes, and when you made that video, the thing that jumped out at me was that you said something. You went on to like talk about the Fermi paradox and aliens, but at the beginning you said something like, "But I'm like a bit of a rare Earthist. Like I think that Earths are actually quite rare, and I can talk more about that if you want me to."
And I never did.
I want you
should
to
do that at some point.
Yeah, I'd quite like to know what you mean by that.
I think that if you count up all of the things that are nice about Earth, you end up with them probably not being that common. So of course, like objects, weirdly, I'll start here. Weirdly, Earths are particularly hard to discover.
Yes.
So this is annoying. This is just like the different systems we have for detecting exoplanets. They are really good at detecting larger planets or closer in planets. So, and I can go to the details there, but like that is just a thing that is true about how we find exoplanets. And so finding like medium-sized planets that are kind of far out, you just find fewer of them, not because there are fewer of them, but because the way that we detect planets is worse at detecting.
Well, why is it?
Like
Why can't it detect those?
So the main way that we detect exoplanets is that planetary system has to be perfectly aligned so that the star and the planet passes in front of the star from our vantage. And solar systems, planetary systems are not oriented with any, like in any way.
Right.
So they're all different orientations. So the vast majority of them are oriented in such a way so that planets do not pass in front of the star. And so if a star is closer in, you can actually like see it even if it's at a little bit of a tilt. So there, like Mercury might be visible if it's a little bit tilted, but Earth wouldn't be because it would be above from like the perspective of coming straight at it like this.
Right.
And then larger planets can do other things, like they can make the star wobble. That's how we initially found the first exoplanet. And so like a large close-in exoplanet can create this wobbling. But smaller planets that are further out are just harder to see.
So smaller ones close by pass by the sun from our vantage. So you sort of measure the light.
Yeah, you measure the dipping of the light of the star.
And the bigger ones further out, they're not as perfect in their orbit, but they make the star.
I don't know that they do. If they're further out, I don't think that they do make the star wobble, but there's something that makes bigger, like all the Neptunes, easier to detect. I don't know if it's just that they're literally larger. I don't think it is.
Yeah. But then, okay, but that on its own doesn't mean that Earth-like planets are rare. It just means we're bad at spotting them.
It means we're bad at spotting them. So Earth-like planets, I think they're probably not that rare. So like a planet roughly in the size of Earth. I think what's probably pretty rare is to have water. And what's even more rare is to have water and land. Now, this doesn't sound doesn't seem impossible.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, when we're talking about Earth-like planets, like, what do you even mean by that? Because, I mean, sure, like, we found some planets that are supposedly similar to Earth, but like he's saying, first of all, with land and water is rare, and then on top of that, like, there being land and water alone, it doesn't really do much. I mean, you're still missing lots of things that Earth has that should be there if it really is Earth-like. And on top of that, I think just finding Earth-like planets in general with no life on it whatsoever is a lot of evidence. It's not proof, but it's a lot of evidence that there probably isn't aliens anywhere, because what is the reason that there is only a life on this one planet? If it really is like people say that, well, you know, life adapted to this planet and this and that, well, what is stopping life from somehow adapting to a different planet that maybe is slightly different from ours, but has roughly maybe the same distance from the sun, has water on it, has land? There's clearly something that started life that did not happen on every other planet.
Possible. But I think that water and land is actually maybe vital for something like humans happening. So like life had a long time to just be in the water, way longer than life has had to be on the land. And there seems to be something about being on land that like pushes animals in a different direction, which I think is very interesting. And there's like ideas about why. But I think that like chemistry would be very hard to do. Like if you were trying to be a technological species, technology is just harder in the water because it's harder to like create, like instead of having pots of liquids to do chemistry with, you'd have to have pots of gases to do chemistry with, and then you put pots of liquid into those pots and it's just like harder. So I think that's a trickier thing, but it also just seems like all of the smartest animals in the ocean came from the land.
Yeah, don't they sort of come out and then go back in again?
Like all the cetaceans.
Yeah.
They like developed their big brains on land and then took them back into water, which is very interesting. And that, like, sorry to octopuses and cephalopods. I know people are mad at me about that immediately, but like they're like a different kind of intelligence, and they've been around for so long and they didn't do a lot of what cetaceans did.
Do we know why they crawled back into the water again?
I mean, I'm sure that somebody
Maybe
does.
we should do that. I don't know. I
have you done it? It's wonderful.
It's nice, isn't it? I don't feel like, I don't feel as though my brain would function very well down there for very long, but I suppose evolution takes a long time.
Yes.
There's one animal that started in the water, that came out of the water, went back into the water, and then came back out of the water again. And I can't remember which one it is. I think it's like a tortoise or something.
There's an
How does
isopod
this not
that's
sound
done that
absolutely
too.
ridiculous?
That's so
It's like those little roly-polies.
Like
Just
how,
like this sort of
how are
can't-
these people
can't
talking
make-
about this with a straight face? I don't know about you, but when I hear that, it literally sounds like something a kid would come up with.
Their mind up, which
you really
is a
think
good
about it.
reminder, a helpful reminder that evolution is not like
It's not going in a direction.
it's not targeted, right? It's just sort of stuff that
If you can, anything that helps you
it's
make
just
more
a
of
bunch
yourself,
of random
there'll be more of
coincidences
that trait.
happen
but there does seem
because
something
of,
qualitatively
genetics.
different about human beings, and there's a lot of debate about
Yeah.
what it is that makes us so special, because although we would say that because it's us, it does feel like we can do some like
Yeah, like so an animal crawled out of the water and then was able to survive outside of it long enough to produce more of its offspring that are also able to do the same thing until it was able to fully breathe out of water, and then it did the same thing in reverse, and then it did the same thing again, and then it did the same thing again in reverse.
really interesting things like build skyscrapers.
Like how many
and-
times does a fish have to have another fish baby until it becomes a squirrel? Like, I don't
radio
understand.
and transistors that are the size of like how fast your fingernail grows in 3 seconds. I worked that out the other day. A modern transistor, its size is as wide as your fingernail grows
In 3 seconds.
in 3 seconds. Yeah, and like it seems like dolphins can't do that. Maybe they're in the water. Chimpanzees can't do that. What do you think is the defining human
Man,
quality?
I feel like we skipped over rare earths too fast. But
Oh,
I
that
guess
might
I'll
be
have
true.
To,
Yeah,
I'll
we
have to
can-
make that video where I get into more details there. But one of the things that I think is
We're on rare bipeds now.
very like a underestimated importance to the development of complex life
Mhm.
and the complex multicellular life and vertebrates and all of this is 4.5 billion years.
Mm.
It's just a long time. So life has probably been on Earth for around 4 billion years. And it has been one continuous unbroken chain of a self-replicator self-replicating. And there have been like blips that were bad. There have been mass extinctions. But like the sun is very stable. We've actually seen this. That's easier to test. The sun is much more stable than the average sun-like star.
Mhm.
So that's weird. And then we have this like nice stable orbit. We've got this stable system, but also just the amount of time is a big deal. And there are opportunities for it to have happened for a long time. But like this level of stability for this long, I think might be something quite unusual about Earth.
Mm.
And I think that it might take a really long time for life to go from like a self-replicator at a deep sea vent to, microphones.
Mm. But when we say rare, we'll go back to it.
Yeah.
When we say rare, what are we talking about? Because
Well, when we're talking about the Fermi paradox, it has to be extremely rare because there
Right.
are a lot of star systems in the galaxy.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's the same. It's kind of similar to time, where it's easy to say 4.5 billion years.
Yeah.
But that's like a really, really long time.
Yeah, I like to say that it's around a third of the life of the universe.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's like people think of the universe as very old, and it's like but like life has been like a single instance of far from equilibrium chemical self-replication has been going on for a third of the life of the universe, and like it's in you right now. It's happening, and that's how your fingernail grows.
Yeah. Do you that kind of thing? You hear like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying it as a way to like blow your mind and make you sort of filled with awe and wonder
Yeah.
about the universe. Does that kind of thought like do that for you? Because for some people it's kind of nihilistic. For some people it's like, whoa, we're like this tiny blip. But
I
for some
think if
people, it's
you
awesome.
think about the size of the Earth in terms of the universe, that can feel kind of like, well, none of this could possibly matter. But if you think about like, what if the Earth was a third of the size of the universe? Because we are a third of the time of the universe.
Look, this is the natural consequences of atheism.
What if
and
life was a third of the size of the universe? Because life is a third of the. It's been going for a third of the
just straight
time
up
of the
nihilism,
universe.
Because what else?
And that makes
if it
me
was
feel like
all
I'm actually part of
hypothetically
something
true
very
what they're
important.
saying.
That's interesting. Especially, time
Nihilism
is,
would be the only
time is just
logical
one of these
conclusion.
dimensions, isn't it? And it's
to arrive to
an important one. But also, actually,
So
I
I don't know
asked Neil
how
deGrasse Tyson about
like,
this.
it's not like every single atheist.
And
is
he
an
said
nihilist, so I
something
don't know
which
how
I sort of
they
hadn't properly
reconcile that.
considered, which is like you can also go down. Like you can zoom out, but you can also zoom in. And if you consider your size relative to like the smallest possible thing, it's also like unfathomably distant. And it's kind of easier to think of it downwards than upwards. But I would sort of guess that we are probably roughly like slap bang in the middle.
We are
of
like
sizes.
slap bang in the middle. Like, but it's a very weird thing that it seems like if you look at the sort of the size of the whole universe and then the size of the smallest unit of size, we're kind of right in the middle, which is very strange.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about like unfathomably small, like the Planck length.
I love how they acknowledge how
so-called,
like way
the
smaller than an
statistical
electron.
possibility of
I
everything.
heard someone say, we'll fact check this, or maybe we
And
won't.
they don't even
that, like,
question.
you know, the Planck length to an atomic nucleus is about the same ratio as like us to an atomic nucleus. Like it's that level of like how small it is, which is kind of insane to think about. But yeah, you can sort of go both ways, and we're sort of slap bang in the middle of you know, spatial extension, taking up a third of the universe on a very, you know, peculiar kind of planet that seems really you know, well suited to bring about those conditions. Is that just like like that just kind of happened? Is that, you know, like what do you is there like a philosophical response that you have to such a sort of incredible mystery, or are you just sort of like,
I think that like I guess my philosophical response is like I think we're probably one of the most interesting things in the universe.
Yeah, for sure. You mean you and me?
Yeah, specifically the two of us. Yeah, well, certainly the humans are one of the most interesting things in the known universe. Definitely, like life is the most interesting thing in the known universe, and that like goes to how much we're interested in it. Like I think we are appropriately interested in it. You know, I think nature documentaries and you know, cancer biologists all together like are appropriately interested in like this really weird thing that is going on. But yeah, what was the deeper the other philosophical question you were asking there?
I was just wondering, like, you know, some people sort of look at this and they feel really, really excited. They're like, cool, I'm part of this big thing.
Yeah.
And some people feel like, oh, right, I'm just one part of this like really, really big thing, you know? And I wonder which sort of side of the coin you're on there. And
yeah, I mean, if it was like some big thing that I didn't think was important, one of the sort of, I think that there's like nobody who's ever lived that didn't change the world some. Even the people who lived for like 2 days, you know. And
saying important, but important in terms.
And I think that there's nobody
what?
who's ever changed the world by themselves, you know. So like, we're all a part of this thing, and the
I'm not coming on Saturday. I'm strapped for cash.
You should sell some stuff on Depop.
way that culture constructs itself is in a lot of ways very reflective of the way that biology constructs itself. So like there's like lots of natural selection going on in culture all the time. Like we don't upload YouTube videos that fail, you know, like if we try something out and it works really badly, people don't like it. We don't do it again. So the, you know, advertisers don't use advertisements that don't work. And so they sort of all settle in on familiar patterns, and they convergently evolve into selling toothpaste with scantily clad hot people. So I think that we are of the living things. There are people who get mad at me about this, but I think that we, of the living things, we are definitely among the most interesting. And I mean, would someone get mad at me about that? We are definitely among the most interesting.
It's the internet.
Someone will get mad about something I say today. But we all get to participate in it and like do our like it's such a weird, like 8 billion people on a planet all kind of making it work for the most part, obviously not entirely, doesn't seem like it would work.
Yeah.
And yet it does. And like, what are the different forces that are making it work? Like, how are we building a society together? How are we building family together? How are we building community together? that's just like the work of all of us. And you know, you wouldn't think that any particular, you know, cyanobacteria mattered, and like kind of doesn't. But like it's all like it's almost wrong to think of any individual cyanobacteria as an individual, in the same way that like obviously humans are individuals, but there is this way in which we aren't, in which we are creating something that is emergent from us, that is much more interesting than any of us individually, much more complex than any of us individually, and I think ultimately more important than any of us individually.
There's a bit of a sort of, our cultural moment is very individualistic, right? It's very
really
sort
is.
of me,
Yeah.
I, and
it's historically unusual how it is right now.
We'll get back to Hank in just a moment, but first, if you've been watching this show for any amount of time now, you'll know that I talk a lot about media bias. Bias is a huge problem, and it's never going to go away, but wouldn't it be great if there were a way for us as consumers of online material to navigate this space? Objectively, what today's sponsor, Ground News Outlets, all in one place, / for a supermassive with only 28% leaning to the left and only 7% leaning to the right. So if the news that you tend to read,
he said he considers everybody who's ever lived important to the history of the world.
QR code.
Even people have lived for 2 days, he says.
And I wonder if it's actually that unlimited access Vantage plan. That said,
when you're coming from this perspective that there could be, with even the idea that there could be more life, and that life is started just arbitrarily, then doesn't that sort of make everybody, everything lose?
And I wonder if it's historically unusual, therefore,
what makes a person important?
To have this particular like brand of nihilism.
Especially when these people are claiming that the universe is
being a part of this grand thing is actually like a bad thing.
Well, we used to have more coherent culture-wide stories. And like you talk about this, you know this stuff much better than I do.
Well, I mean, one of those big ones is religion, and we talk about religion a lot, but it's not just religion, right? Like I think about the reason why America works as a secular experiment is because although, it was founded in a pretty secular manner, it had like stories. You've got Washington and the cherry tree or something, right? And you've got like the founding fathers. And I sometimes say, it seems like when I watch debates from like the 70s or 80s, it seems like debates were kind of settled just by figuring out like what the founding fathers said. It's like, well, Thomas Jefferson thought this, and everyone goes, oh, okay then. You know, like they're quoting some religious
that
figure.
still works on me to some extent.
You think?
A little bit, for me particularly. I'm like, well, in part because you had a bunch of people who were trying to figure out a way to do a thing in a very new way, and like it did kind of work. It has gotten better over time, which they allowed for. You know, it remains an imperfect system, but they set up a system that was you know, I look at, you know, New Zealand or something, like a more recent democracy where they had some others to go off of when they planned theirs, and I was like, there's some things there that are better than our way, but like we didn't have any idea how to do a democracy. It was an entirely new idea, and the amount that the world has changed in those 275 years is so huge. What is it now? 200, something like that.
Since the Declaration?
Yeah.
Isn't it like nearly 250?
Nearly 250.
I feel like people are talking about...
We're about to get to 250.
And that'd be next year, 2026, I think. Yeah.
And that amount of change that the system allowed for is kind of remarkable.
Yeah, and in many ways that was sort of how it was designed, I suppose. But it did... It wasn't like they wrote into the Constitution and the Declaration like these national origin stories, but it kind of had that revolution. Look at the artwork, you know, this sort of Washington
they knew what they were
Delaware
doing. They knew what they were doing in the same way that everybody who's ever created a religion knew what they were doing.
Yeah, right.
You know, like you have to create the myths.
Yeah. And do you think we have a current sort of cultural myth, or is it just like
we have a really fractured bunch of cultural myths?
Yeah. It feels that way. It feels like there's sort of nothing unifying. And so when people talk...
And I'm sure that it's always been fractured. Like nationalism is always going to be more fractured than a religion. Like you don't get to have a pope. And And if you do, then that's actually quite bad. Like there are some places that do kind of get to have the Pope of nationalism, and we call those dictators.
Yes.
And it's like it's supposed to be messy.
And like, yeah, there does seem to be something different though about like now versus then. And sometimes people say it's like we've lost our national story or we've lost our religious faith. And I'm like, we've also like developed like telecommunication algorithms and I'm sort of like trying to work out who's right here. It does seem like there's something kind of going on with people not being very happy. And I wonder, do you think that is actually something new? Do you think there is really